Night. Silence. An airfield swallowed by the blackness of the Western Russian front. 1942. Wind drags across the barren ground, like a whisper of something ancient and hungry. A lone lantern swings, its faint glow barely revealing the silhouettes of young women in oversized uniforms, their breaths turning into ghostly white mist. And then, from somewhere out in the forest line, a sound. Not the rumble of an engine, not the growl of a fighter plane, just a soft, eerie rustling, like fabric brushing through the night. A German sentry stiffens, his fingers tightening around his rifle. He knows that sound. He has heard it before. He has watched men older and braver than him tremble when it appears. He whispers a single word, a word born from fear, frustration, and superstition. Nachthexen. The night witches. A heartbeat later, the sky erupts. Bombs fall in a rain of fire, tearing through the German encampment with unrelenting precision. And when he looks up, desperately trying to track the attackers, he sees only vague black chapesmal, slow, drifting like shadows across the moon. He fires. His comrades fire. Searchlights slice through the sky in frantic sweeps. But the shadows are already gone. The night witches have vanished into the darkness again, as if swallowed whole by the night that protects them. But this story does not begin with fear. It begins with fire, with invasion, with a country collapsing under the weight of war. Summer, 1941. The Soviet Union wakes to the roar of tanks and artillery as Hitler launches Operation Barbarossa, largest invasion in human history. Cities burn, families flee, and everywhere, young men are called to the front lines, leaving behind schools, factories, farms, dreams. But in the middle of this chaos, something unexpected happens. Letters begin arriving in Moscow, hundreds at first, then thousands. Not from soldiers, but from women, women from villages, universities, industrial towns, women barely out of their teenage years, women too young to vote, too young to marry, yet old enough to feel the crushing weight of watching their homeland set ablaze. Their messages are desperate, determined. Let us fight. Let us fly. We can serve. We can help. We can do more. And one woman listens. Marina Raskova. The Soviet Union's aviation legend, record-setting navigator, national hero. A woman so iconic that young girls keep her photographs hidden under their pillows like sacred relics. Raskova walks into the Kremlin with those letters in her hands, and she asks for something unprecedented, something that would have been unthinkable anywhere else in the world. An all-women's aviation regiment. Not just mechanics, not just nurses, but pilots, navigators, bombardiers, warriors. Against all expectation, Stalin approves. 3 regiments are formed. But one in particular will etch its name into the bones of history with smoke, fire, and the whisper of wooden wings. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment, later known to the world as the Night Witches. Their training begins in a whirlwind of exhaustion and grit. The women arrive at the training facility in Engelsa windswept military base near the Volga River. Most of them are barely 20. Some arrive still wearing school shoes. Others bring notebooks instead of military gear. All of them are issued men's uniforms, pants too long, jackets too wide, boots that swallow their feet whole. They laugh. They curse. They tear the uniforms apart and sew them back together by candlelight. By morning, the oversized clothes fit somewhat, but their determination fits perfectly. Their aircraft awaits them, the Polikarpov Po-2. A relic. A joke. An open cockpit biplane made of plywood and canvas, slower than a car, older than most of the pilots who will fly it. But to these young women, it becomes something else. It becomes a partner, a confidant, a weapon forged not from steel, but from bravery. During the first orientation, An instructor warns them. This is not a warplane. This is a sewing machine with wings. The girls smirk. But they learn. They learn the delicate shudder of the wooden frame. They learn the feel of wind coursing through the open cockpit like icy knives. They learn how to navigate without radio or radar, relying only on stars, memory, and instinct. And most importantly, they learn the tactic that will strike terror into the German heart. Engine off bombing. Approach the target. Cut the engine. Let the plane glide silently, becoming nothing more than a ghost drifting across the sky. Then drop the bombs. Restart the engine just before hitting the treetops. Escape into the dark before anyone even knows where death came from. It is dangerous, reckless, suicidal, some say, but it works. Their first missions are clumsy, and terrifying, and unforgettable. Night settles on the front lines like a heavy shroud. The young women assemble on the airfield, small figures dwarfed by the night. They check each other's scarves. They tighten each other's straps. They whisper encouragements. No one says the word fear. Not out loud, because fear is already everywhere. On their breath, in their blood, gripping their hearts like a fist. The engines sputter to life, coughing through the cold. Lanterns cast flickering halos of light around the aircraft. One by one, the Po-2 lift into the night on fragile wings. Above them, darkness spreads endlessly, a vast, silent ocean they must cross with nothing but moonlight and determination. Their first target, a German supply depot, heavily guarded, heavily fortified, unforgiving. The Po-2 biplanes reach the target zone. Spotlights sweep the sky, searching, probing. Machine gun fire rattles upward like chains thrown into the heavens. The girls exchange a look silent, resolute. They pull the throttle. The engines die. Instant silence. The plane becomes a falling leaf in the night wind. Down below, German soldiers glance up, suddenly uneasy. There is something moving overhead, something slow, something soundless. And then, the bombs fall. A series of eruptions tear through the depot. Oil drums ignite. Trucks explode. Flames chase each other across the earth. By the time German anti-aircraft guns open fire, the night witches are gone, their engines sputtering back to life as they slip into the darkness like shadows returning to the forest. It is a small victory, but a profound one. And in the diaries the girls will write later, nearly all of them will speak of that night the same way. It was the first time we truly knew we could win. But victory is never easy. And for the night witches, it is never gentle. Training is brutal. Missions are relentless. They must fly old planes that refuse to forgive even the slightest mistake. Their hands blister. Their faces burn from frostbite. Their hair becomes brittle from the cold. Their hearts still young, still fragile, learn to beat under the shadow of death. One night, a storm rolls in unexpectedly. Snow whips across the sky like shards of broken glass. A pair of Night Witch pilots, Masha and Polina, attempt to return to base. Visibility drops to nothing. The engine strains. The wooden wings groan under the weight of accumulating ice. Polina tries to navigate, her fingers numb, her voice trembling as she reads the map again and again. "We're off course," she whispers. Masha doesn't respond. Her eyes are frozen open, searching for anything. A tree line, a river, a flicker of lantern light. But the world is blank and merciless. Their plane descends slowly, quietly. Not because they want it to, but because gravity demands it. Hours later, when the storm clears, a search team finds the Po-2 buried in snow. The women inside are motionless, still holding hands. The regiment mourns, but there is no time for grief. That night, the mission continues. And it is in that moment, their engines coughing in the dark, that the women understand a truth harsher than the winter wind. No one will save them. No one will avenge them. No one will fly in their place. This sky is theirs. Its dangers, its darkness, its ghosts, everything. As the months pass, the night witches transform. From students into soldiers. From daughters into warriors. From young women into instruments of quiet, devastating precision. They learn to recognize enemy fire by sound alone. They learn to repair engines in the dark, using only their sense of touch. They learn to stay awake for 18 missions a night, fueling themselves on courage, adrenaline, and tea that has long since gone cold. And they learn something else, too. The Germans fear them. Not the mail regiments. Not the heavy bombers. Not the tanks or the artillery. They fear the tiny wooden planes that whisper death across the sky. Because no amount of training can prepare a soldier for an enemy he cannot hear, cannot see, cannot hunt. One German officer writes in his diary, "They come from nowhere. They attack without mercy. And they vanish before we can understand what has happened." Another writes, "Even our best pilots cannot catch them. Their planes fly too slow to be targeted, too silent to be detected, too light to be hit. And perhaps, most humiliating of all, they are women." The men of the Luftwaffe begin to feel a superstition creeping into their bones. Some refuse night watch duty. Others pray before sunset. A few whisper that the night witches can shapeshift, bending the darkness to their will. It doesn't matter what stories they tell themselves. The truth is simpler and far more terrifying. The night witches are real. They are relentless. And they are coming again tonight. As Part 1 closes, dawn breaks over the front lines. The sky glows faintly orange, illuminating the exhausted faces of the young pilots returning from another night of battle. Their planes show scars, bullet holes, torn canvas, cracked struts. Their hands shake. Their lips are blue from the cold. Their eyes carry a weight far older than their years. But they walk across the airfield with quiet pride, because they know, in their bones, in their blood, that the night belongs to them. And soon, the war will fear their name more than ever. Dawn rises reluctantly over the battered Soviet front. The airfield is quiet, except for the occasional cough of an engine being repaired, the distant clatter of tools, and the soft murmur of exhausted voices. The night witches return from their missions one by one, their planes limping across the runway like wounded birds. Frost clings to their eyebrows, their scarves stiff with ice. They dismount stiffly, legs trembling, fingers barely able to unclasp their seatbelts after hours exposed to the freezing air. For a moment, they allow themselves to breathe, to feel the earth again, to feel alive. But rest is brief. War allows no luxury, not even for heroes. A new night, a new enemy. Over the next weeks, the Luftwaffe begins to adapt. What the Germans cannot understand, they attempt to overwhelm with firepower. Anti-aircraft guns multiply. Searchlights stretch across the sky like white claws trying to tear open the night. Fighter patrols roam the darkness, engines growling like predators searching for prey. But the night witches are not prey. They study German response patterns. They analyze the timing of searchlights, the angles of anti-aircraft bursts, the flight paths of enemy fighters. Every detail matters. Their commanders hold briefings in dimly lit rooms where maps are covered with cigarette-burned edges and hastily scribbled notes. Every pilot leans forward, eyes bright despite exhaustion. These women do not fight with technology. They fight with intellect, with instinct, with fearlessness sharpened by necessity. And they develop a strategy the Germans never expect. Team hunting. 3 po 2 seconds fly together. 2 act as decoys, diving suddenly, attracting gunfire, forcing spotlights to chase them, while the third plane slips into the silence, glides over the target with its engine off, and releases its bombs, undetected. It is precise. It is deadly. It turns the sky into a chessboard, where the night witches are always 3 moves ahead. The woman who leads them. At the heart of the regiment stands Major Yevdokia Bershanskaya, their commander. She is not the loudest voice, not the tallest presence, but she carries an authority forged from discipline, compassion, and unwavering belief in her girls. She knows each pilot by name, by skill, by fear, by dream. When a mission goes wrong, she is the one who sits beside the survivors, quietly holding their hands. When a pilot disobeys orders, she is the one who pulls her aside, eyes sharp, voice low, demanding excellence. Her leadership binds the regiment together, not through force, but through trust. And the women follow her because they know she would never ask them to do something she wouldn't do herself. One cold evening, as the regiment prepares for a large-scale operation near the Caucasus, a young pilot named Larissa approaches Bershanskaya. "Comrade Major," she whispers, "I'm afraid I won't come back tonight." Bershanskaya looks at her studies, her eyes, not her uniform. "Then fly," she says softly, "as if you already survived." Larissa nods. And she does survive. Years later, she will say that sentence carried her through the entire war. The night the sky turned to fire. Summer, 1943. The Battle of the Kuban. A massive German push threatens to break Soviet lines. The night witches are deployed in waves. Night after night, they assault supply depots, ammunition trains, and fortified gun positions. Their missions blur together. A rhythm of danger and exhaustion that feels eternal. But one night stands apart. A convoy of German reinforcements is spotted moving through a narrow mountain pass. This convoy must be stopped. If it reaches the front, the Soviet defense in the region will collapse. The night witches are sent to intercept. The mountains are treacherous dark shapes, rising like frozen waves. Updrafts toss the Po-2 around like toys. Turmoil fills the cockpit. Nadezhda Popova, one of the regiment's most skilled pilots, leads the formation. Her plane struggles in the thin mountain air, wings vibrating as if screaming against the wind. Below, the convoy snakes along a narrow road. Trucks filled with ammunition, fuel tankers, armored carriers. A lifeline of destruction moving steadily toward the battlefield. The night witches dive. Anti-aircraft fire erupts. Tracer rounds cut across the sky in violent, glowing arcs. Mountains amplify every explosion, sending shockwaves rolling through the darkness. Popova signals her navigator. Ready. The bombs drop. The first explosion hits a fuel tanker. A massive fireball surges upward, lighting the mountains in terrifying brilliance. The women shield their eyes, blinded for a moment. Then, the chain reaction begins. One truck ignites another. Another detonates ammunition. Then another. And another. The entire convoy becomes a river of fire pouring down the mountainside. For a moment, the night turns orange, and red and gold. Beautiful, terrifying, apocalyptic. The women circle back to assess the damage. There is nothing left to bomb. Just flames climbing the dark sky, like the fingers of some furious god. When they return to base, Popova collapses into the snow, shaking. She isn't crying. She isn't laughing. She is simply overwhelmed by the enormity of what they have just done. Her hands, still trembling, leave sweat marks on the cold metal of the cockpit. Her commander kneels beside her. "You did your duty," Bershanskaya whispers. Popova nods slowly. "Yes, but I'm still human. The ghost in the sky." The Germans, furious at their losses, double their efforts to destroy the night witches. A new ace pilot is assigned to track them down. A skilled Luftwaffe veteran with dozens of kills. He believes the night witches will be simple prey. He is wrong. One night, he catches sight of a Po-2 gliding toward a target. He dives, guns blazing. But the bullets pass beneath the slow-moving wooden plane. Confused, He loops back. Tries again. The Po-2 lifts slightly. Impossibly agile at low speed. And once again, his shots go wide. He pushes his engine harder, almost stalling at the low speed needed to line up the shot. Then, he sees it. Another Po-2 behind him. And another. He is surrounded. Not by fighter planes, not by machines built for combat, but by the ghosts he was sent to kill. Searchlights ignite the sky. Anti-aircraft bursts rise from below. He panics. He dives. He flees the battlefield, radioing desperately. I can't hit them. I can't fight shadows. He never attempts to engage them again. That night, German morale shatters even further. Because if their best pilot cannot take down a wooden toy plane, what hope do ordinary soldiers have? The cost of night, but heroism demands payment. For every triumph, there is tragedy waiting patiently in the dark. One bitter winter night, two young pilots Katya and Sonia Are assigned a high-risk bombing run near an ammunition depot. The temperature drops to -30°C. The wind howls through the open cockpit, like a pack of wolves. Their scarves freeze. Their eyelashes frost over. Their fingers struggle to move. But they press on. As they approach the target, a searchlight locks onto their plane. Pure white, merciless. Anti-aircraft guns roar. Bullets tear through the canvas wings. The Po-2 trembles violently. Katya, the pilot, yells for Sonia to prepare for emergency release. They drop their bombs early, the blast illuminating the night. But a moment later, a shell hits their engine. The plane tilts, starts to spiral. Katya fights the controls, but the wooden frame is shattered. The Po-2 descends toward a frozen field. Sonia grabs Katya's hand. No words, just a silent promise that they won't die alone. The light from the burning depot reflects off the snow as their plane vanishes into the night. They are found days later by a Soviet patrol, still clasping hands. Their funerals are quiet. Snow falls softly over the airfield as the women of the regiment stand in formation, scarves fluttering in the wind. Bershanskaya reads their names. Her voice does not shake, but her eyes glisten. We will continue their mission, she says. And that night, they fly again, the heart of the regiment. To survive a war like this, the Night Witches form bonds stronger than steel. They share everything: food, blankets, secrets, fears. They celebrate birthdays with stolen chocolate or a cup of hot tea. They mend each other's uniforms, share letters from home, and write new ones for those too exhausted to hold a pen. They also fight. Oh yes, they fight. About whose turn it is to fly the most dangerous missions. About which plane is the safest disaster. About stolen boots, ripped scarves, broken compasses. But the fights never last. Not when every night could be their last. One evening, during a rare moment of rest, the women gather around a small stove in the barracks. The fire crackles weakly. A pot of soup simmers, thin but warm. Laughter fills the room. Real laughter. Not the brittle kind war sometimes produces. Irina Sebrova, the navigator with over 1,000 missions ahead of her, tells a story about nearly landing in a German field by accident because she followed the wrong star. Another pilot teases her. Maybe it was the star of destiny. Irina grins. No, it was the star of incompetence. They all laugh. Moments like these are rare, precious, the kind that keep them human, because once night falls, they will return to the sky. And humanity must be folded away like a scarf before takeoff. A warning in the wind. By late 1943, something shifts. Whispers spread through the regiment. The front is stabilizing. The Soviet forces are pushing back. Victory once unthinkable now glimmers faintly on the horizon. But war has a habit of striking hardest just when hope appears. One night, a meteorological officer warns Bershanskaya. Tonight's wind patterns are unpredictable, treacherous. I advise grounding the regiment. Bershanskaya listens, considers. But orders from Moscow are clear. The railroad supply hub must be destroyed tonight. And so the planes are readied. Engines sputter to life. Reluctantly, the wind tugs at the wings like an impatient child. The night feels restless, uneasy. Popova senses it immediately. She tightens her harness, fingers trembling slightly. "Something is wrong," she whispers. Her navigator looks at her. "Everything is wrong. That's why we're here." They take off. One by one, the PO2 seconds disappear into the turbulent sky, swallowed by clouds that churn like dark oceans. Ahead lies danger, surprises, and a test none of them expect. Night swallows the Po2 squadron as they ascend into the clouds. The sky tonight feels alive, shifting, twisting, breathing as though it resents their presence. Wind buffets the fragile wings. Ice gathers along the struts. The wooden frames creak like old bones in a storm. Yet the night witches press forward. They have flown through worse. They have flown through blizzards, through artillery fire, through nights where even the moon refused to shine. But tonight feels different, uncertain, unpredictable, as if the air itself is changing its mind. Popova wipes frost from her goggles. Her navigator, Olga, studies the stars, what few still pierce through the churning clouds. "We're drifting," Olga says, her breath fogging the air. "Winds pushing us southwest." Popova nods, adjusting the rudder with stiff, aching fingers. Suddenly, lightning flickers through the clouds, silent, distant, like an omen. The weather officer had warned them. But orders were orders, and these women have learned long ago that hesitation kills faster than bullets. The storm. As they reach the midpoint, the sky cracks open. Wind surges upward, punching the lightweight Po2 like a fist. Popova's plane lurches violently. Olga clutches the cockpit frame, knuckles white. "We have to climb," Popova shouts. Olga checks her compass. "We'll lose our heading." "We've already lost it," Popova says. They pull the stick. The plane groans. Nearby, 2 other Po2 seconds are caught in the same gale. One rising sharply, the other thrown sideways like a leaf in a tempest. The storm isn't just weather. It feels like a test. Something primordial, ancient, determined to tear them from the sky. Clouds churn like boiling smoke. Winds roar. Ice forms rapidly across the wings, weighing them down. The wooden ribs creak, bending dangerously. The Po2 was never built for storms. It was meant for training flights, crop dusting, and gentle skies. Not this. Not war. Not death swirling around them with claws made of wind. And yet, they continue. The lost plane. A crackle bursts through Popova's radio, broken, fuzzy, almost drowned by static. "Popova, do you copy?" "Lost. Lost." She recognizes the voice. Lida, one of the youngest pilots in the regiment, barely 18. "Lida, report your position," Popova shouts. "Don't know, no visual, compass, spinning." Lightning illuminates a terrifying sight. Lida's Po2 is below them, rocking violently, nose dipping sharply. Her navigator waves frantically. Wind screams. The plane spirals. Popova tries to dive toward them, but Olga grabs her arm. "Nadia, you'll crash." Popova hesitates just one heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, Lida's plane slips deeper into the storm, swallowed by the darkness. And then, silence. A silence so complete, so merciless, that even the storm seems to hold its breath. "Nadia," Olga whispers, but Popova pushes the grief aside. They are still in the sky. They are still alive. And their mission isn't over. The target. By some miracle or, perhaps muscle memory forged through hundreds of missions, The women finally break through the storm's edge. Below lies the German railroad hub, a sprawling network of tracks, fuel depots, ammunition trains, and supply warehouses. The lifeline that feeds the German front. If the Soviets can cut it, even for one night, the enemy offensive will fracture. This is why the night witches were sent. Popova wipes her goggles again. Her hands still shake from the storm. "Engine off," she says quietly. Olga hesitates. "After that?" "Are you sure?" Popova nods. They cut the engine. Instantly, the world becomes quiet. The storm still roars in the distance. But here, in the calm black air above the target, there is only silence. Only the soft whisper of wind brushing against the canvas wings. They glide downward like ghosts. Below, the Germans move with confidence. The storm has convinced them no attack is coming. Searchlights are idle. Anti-aircraft guns unmanned. Popova steadies her plane. "Release," she whispers. Olga pulls the lever. 2 bombs fall. Small, almost laughably small, compared to the steel monsters dropped by Western bombers. But placed correctly, they are devastating. The first explosion hits a fuel tank. The second ignites the ammunition cart beside it. Fire erupts across the hub, a chain reaction of destruction that sends soldiers scrambling, shouting in panic. And then, Popova restarts the engine, the propeller coughing back to life just as they skim above the treetops. Mission accomplished. But the night is far from over. The pursuit, the explosions jolt the Germans awake. Searchlights flare to life. Machine guns roar. Even the storm seems to retreat, replaced by a barrage of man-made lightning. Popova banks hard left, weaving between trees. Tracer rounds zip past them, glowing red in the darkness. 2 enemy fighters scrambling, Olga yells, reading the radio intercepts. The Luftwaffe has launched Bf-110 night fighters, fast and heavily armed. The Po-2 is no match. But speed is irrelevant, because the slow, fragile Po-2 can do something the German fighters cannot. Turn inside their arc. Popova drops altitude. Lower, lower, until their wooden skis almost skim the snowy ground. The German fighters roar overhead, too fast to adjust. "They can't slow enough to target us," Olga says, forcing a breathless grin. Popova doesn't smile. She knows the danger isn't over. Another burst of gunfire. Another spotlight. Another roar of engines approaching from behind. They zigzag through the darkness, using every trick the regiment has developed over endless nights of combat. And finally, they break free. The gunfire fades. The spotlights disappear. The roar of German engines recedes into the distance. Popova exhales, her entire body trembling. "We made it," Olga whispers. But Popova shakes her head. "Not all of us." The return. The storm has moved east now, leaving behind a bruised sky and bitter cold. The Po-2 limps homeward, frost spreading across its wings like white veins. Fuel is dangerously low. The engine coughs and rattles. When the airfield comes into view, Popova feels her chest tighten, not from relief, but from dread, because she sees the other pilots waiting, counting the silhouettes returning from the darkness. And there are fewer than before. She lands, hard, skidding across the snow. The ground crew rushes forward. Mechanics pull open the engine cowling, steam hissing into the frigid air. Bershanskaya approaches silently. Her face is calm, but her eyes flicker with the questions she already fears the answers to. Popova shakes her head. "Lida, she didn't make it." The women around them grow still. Silence falls. A heavy, suffocating silence that speaks more than any words could. No one cries yet. Not here. Not in front of each other. Not while the war continues to breathe down their necks. Bershanskaya places a gloved hand on Popova's shoulder. "We will remember her," she says quietly. "And we will fly again." Popova nods, wiping frozen sweat from her brow. They all know the truth. Mourning must wait until after victory, if they survive long enough to see it. The letter home. That night, in the dim barracks, lit by a single flickering bulb, Olga finds Popova hunched over a desk, pencil shaking in her hand. "What are you writing?" Olga asks gently. "A letter to Lida's mother." Olga sits beside her. The air smells of kerosene, wool, and cold metal. The scent of war. Popova reads the letter aloud. "Your daughter was brave. She fought for her homeland with honor. Her last act was one of courage, not fear." Her voice trembles. "She did not die alone." Olga places a hand over hers. "You don't have to lie," Olga whispers. Popova's eyes fill with tears. She refuses to let fall. "I'm not lying," she says. "I was with her. Not in the same plane, but in the same sky." Olga nods. She understands. This is how the night witches survive. By carrying each other's memories, not their deaths. The night after loss. The next night, they fly again. Not because they want to. Not because they are forced to. But because the absence of one among them makes the war feel heavier. Someone must fill the empty slot in the formation. Someone must carry Lida's mission forward. That someone is Maria, a pilot who has never flown lead at night before. Her hands tremble as she grips the controls. Her heart races. Her breath shakes. When the moment comes to cut the engine, she hesitates. For a terrifying moment, she freezes, caught between the memory of Lida's descent into darkness and the duty waiting below. Popova pulls alongside her, signaling silently, "You can do this. You are not alone." Maria inhales, steadies her hands, and cuts the engine. The wind takes hold. The Po-2 glides into the night. Maria drops the bomb, her aim true. When her engine restarts, her cry of relief crackles through the radio. The regiment cheers. Even Popova allows herself a small, tired smile. They return in formation. One plane missing, one plane reborn. The price of courage. As the months wear on, the toll of war becomes visible in every mirror, in every scar, every dark circle beneath eyes, too young to be this old. Hands tremble even when not flying. Shoulders ache from the hours spent fighting the wind. Skin splits from the cold. Hearts fracture from the losses. But courage does not vanish. If anything, it grows stronger, fed by grief. Because every woman who falls becomes a reason for the others to rise. A new order. In the spring of 1944, the regiment receives a message from High Command. They are to support Operation Bagration, the massive Soviet offensive designed to crush the German Army Group Center. This will be the largest operation they have ever participated in. They know what it means. More missions, more danger, more loss, but also a chance to change the course of the war. Bershanskaya gathers them. Her voice is steel, her presence unshakable. "We are no longer shadows," she says. "We are a storm the enemy cannot stop. And we will light the path to victory." The women rise from their seats, tired, scarred, but unbroken. Outside, the sky is darkening again. Another night, another mission, another step toward the end. They walk toward their planes in silence, not because they fear what comes next, but because they understand it all too well. They secure their scarves, tighten their harnesses, share one last look with each other. Not of fear, not of goodbye, but of promise. Because the night witches know, as long as one of them takes to the sky, none of them fly alone. Night settles over the Eastern Front, like a cloak woven from smoke and sorrow. It is the summer of 1944. And war has reshaped everything. Cities, lives, futures, even the sky itself. For the night witches, the darkness has become a second home. They know every shift in the wind, every glimmer of moonlight, every whisper of the earth below. And tonight, they stand on the edge of their greatest trial. Operation Bagration has begun, a gargantuan Soviet offensive designed to break the spine of the German Army Group Center and turn the tide of the Eastern Front once and for all. The stakes have never been higher, nor the danger greater. The Night Witches are ordered to conduct relentless night raids against enemy supply lines, artillery positions, and troop concentrations. The missions come rapidly, hour after hour, night after night, until sleep feels like a distant memory. But no one complains. They know the end of the war may be approaching, and they want desperately to help bring it home. The weight of war. The airfield is alive with movement. Mechanics hurry between planes. Navigators review maps lit by dim lanterns. Pilots tie scarves around their heads with hands that tremble slightly from fatigue. Popova stands beside her aircraft, gazing at the horizon. Dawn is still hours away, but the sky glows faintly from distant fires. The earth burns endlessly, now fronts shifting, towns falling, armies colliding. Olga joins her, rubbing her frozen hands together. "Another double mission tonight," she says, her voice strained. Popova nods. It's not unusual. These days, they sometimes fly 15 missions in one night. "You think this will be the one?" Olga asks. "The one that ends it?" Popova's eyes soften. "No, but maybe it's one that gets us closer." They climb into the cockpit. Mechanics pull the chocks. The engine sputters, coughs, catches. A tired roar from a machine that has worked far too hard, for far too long. Then they rise into the night once more. A sky full of hunters. But tonight is different. The Luftwaffe has grown desperate. They know their supply lines are failing, their soldiers faltering, their once invincible momentum slipping away. And so they unleash everything. Every fighter plane, every searchlight, every anti-aircraft gun, to claw back control of the night. As the Night Witches approach their target, the sky comes alive with fire. Searchlights slice upward, tracer rounds streak in screaming arcs. Explosions bloom like deadly flowers across the darkness. Olga tenses. "They're expecting us." Popova yanks the stick, diving sharply as a burst of gunfire sweeps past them. Two other Night Witch aircraft scatter left and right, their wings glowing briefly under the relentless beams of light. One is hit. A flash, a burst of flame, and a silence more terrible than the explosion itself. Popova forces herself not to look, not to think. Ahead the target. A series of rail lines carrying ammunition to the German front. "Engine off," she rasps. The engine dies. Silence falls. They glide through the cold air. Invisible. Soundless. Death riding on canvas wings. Below, German troops scramble. They know the tactic now. They've learned to fear the sudden quiet. Olga pulls the release. Bombs fall like whispered prayers. The explosions ripple through the rail yard, tearing through supply cars and stacks of ammunition crates. A mushroom of fire rises into the night, illuminating the sky in violent oranges and yellows. Popova restarts the engine, climbing sharply. But the Germans are ready. Searchlights lock on. Tracer rounds pursue them. The sky becomes a cage of fire. "We can't stay up here," Olga yells. Popova dives. Lower, lower, skimming treetops, sparks flying from the skis as they brush against branches. They escape by the width of a breath. Behind them, the rail yard burns like a fallen star. The night of 1,000 flames. The regiment returns to base shaken but unbroken. Yet the night is not over. Another target awaits. An artillery battery dug deep into the forest, pounding Soviet positions mercilessly. The women reload, refuel, recheck their maps, and take off again. This time, the weather is merciless. Storm clouds roll in, lightning flashing between them like cracks in a shattered sky. Wind buffets the light Po-2, pushing them dangerously close to the tree line. The forest below stretches endlessly dark, ancient, indifferent. Popova spots the glow ahead, the artillery battery firing towards Soviet lines. "Now," she cries. The engine cuts. They descend. The bombs drop. The guns fall silent. But as they climb, an explosion erupts below. A delayed blast that shakes the sky. The shock wave hits them. The Po-2 flips violently. Popova grips the controls, fighting against gravity's pull. Olga's map flies out of her hands, sucked into the open night. The plane spirals. The world becomes a blur of darkness and sparks. "Hold on," Popova yells. With a final effort, she stabilizes the aircraft. Their breaths come in ragged gasps. Their hearts thunder with terror and relief. War has spared them for another moment, but they know every second is borrowed time. The final winter, 1944, 1945, the coldest months the regiment will ever endure. The wind is so sharp it cuts through clothing like knives. Frost clings to every surface. Engines refuse to start. Maps tear like paper soaked in ice. But still, they fly. Sometimes their eyelashes freeze shut. Sometimes their fingers numb so completely they cannot feel the controls. Sometimes they return with frostbite so severe the medics must pry their hands open from the frozen metal of the cockpit. And still, they fly. Because the war is reaching its final, terrible crescendo. Berlin is weakening. The German lines are cracking. But desperate armies fight hardest at the end. And the Night Witches must help deliver the final blow. The battle for the Oder River. February 1945. The Soviet army needs to cross the Oder River to reach Berlin. But German forces have fortified the riverbanks with bunkers, artillery nests, and machine gun positions. The Night Witches are assigned a crucial task: destroy enemy strongpoints along the river under cover of night. The missions are brutal. Searchlights illuminate the entire river like a stage. Machine guns fire at anything that moves. The wind carries the scent of mud, smoke, and fear. The Po-2 approach low. Engine off. Silent. Bombs drop. Explosions ripple along the riverbanks. Soviet forces advance through gaps carved by the Night Witches' strikes. Night after night, they return. Eyes bloodshot. Hands shaking. Bodies numb. Spirits frayed by exhaustion. But the river is crossed. Berlin is now within reach. And everyone knows. The end is near. The last mission, April 1945. The Night Witches gather for what will become their final combat mission of the war. They do not know this yet. But something in the air feels different. Charged. Heavy. Expectant. The target is a retreating German column. A last, desperate attempt to regroup. The women prepare in silence. No jokes tonight. No teasing. No nervous laughter. Only focus. Only duty. Popova climbs into the cockpit. Her hands tremble not from fear, but from the accumulated weight of years spent in the night sky. Olga squeezes her arm. "Let's finish this," she says. They take off. The night embraces them once more. When they reach the target, the engine cuts. The plane glides. Below, headlights illuminate the retreating column. Trucks, soldiers, ammunition wagons. The bombs fall. The explosions glow like embers falling into dry grass. The last mission is clean, precise, final. As they fly back, dawn begins to break. A pale, uncertain light washing over a world reshaped by war. When they land, Bershanskaya meets them with a rare smile. "A message from command," she says. "You've completed your final operation. The regiment is being withdrawn from combat." The women stare. It takes a moment to understand. The war at least for them, is over. Olga breaks first. Her laughter mixes with tears. Popova sinks to her knees, overwhelmed. The ground feels strange beneath her, real, solid, alive. For the first time in years, she is not preparing for the night, not bracing for the sky. She is simply here, alive. After the war, when victory finally arrives, the country celebrates. Cities erupt in joy. Flags wave. Songs echo down the streets. But the night witches return home quietly. To villages, universities, factories, most are unnoticed. Many are unrecognized. They blend back into civilian life. Some become teachers. Some become engineers. Some raise children. Some carry wounds visible and invisible for the rest of their lives. But among themselves, they remain sisters, bound by shared darkness, shared courage, shared sacrifice. They gather for reunions. They laugh about broken engines, freezing nights, and improbable landings. They mourn those who did not return. And sometimes, when the air is still, they tilt their heads upward, listening for the whisper of wings in the night. The legacy. The Germans called them night witches. Part insult, part superstition, part admiration. But history remembers them differently. They were fighters. They were pioneers. They were daughters, students, dreamers, who became legends, not because they sought glory, but because they refused to surrender to fear. Their planes were slow, fragile, laughably outdated, but their spirits, their courage, their resilience, were unbreakable. They flew more than 23,000 missions, dropped more than 3,000 tons of bombs, earned 24 Hero of the Soviet Union medals, and changed the course of the war in ways far greater than the world ever expected. Not with steel, not with might, but with determination, skill, and the quiet power of those who refuse to be underestimated. The night witches did not fly to become heroes. They flew because the world needed them. And in doing so, they proved that bravery has no gender, only the shape of a heart that chooses to soar when everything else falls. Final lines for your ending. They were shadows in the night. They were whispers on the wind. They were the night witches. And their story will live as long as courage lives.